Welcome to the first lecture in the first module. The first lecture is called The Urgency, but it is also within the module with more lectures. The module is called Why Should I Care? This is the very first lecture in this course about circular chemistry. It is, of course, a good beginning to describe and remind us why we are talking about this subject at all. The important background and the situation we need to understand so we can motivate and give this subject the right priority in our daily lives. Think about this course as you will not only learn for yourself. There is always a board, client, colleagues, key person, or a boss you need to convince. This course will therefore help you to give you the appropriate arguments for making a change. First, there is a climate urgency, of course, you are already very aware of. There is a short time, no doubt about that. But the next step is to find out how I can use my own skill, position and resources in a cost-efficient way. The challenge is enormous when looking on the figures and the deadline. But we still need not only face a climate crisis, we have daily reporting on fires, storms, heat waves, etc. But this is just what we see. The scientists have identified many other areas that are as urgent as the climate crisis. This graph was presented in 2009 in a scientific paper that described the sustainability urgency in 9 different aspects, and climate was just one of them. The red areas illustrates that the planetary boundaries was already crossed and a quick action is needed for keeping the civilization at a decent level. But if you look on this area, the first impression might, however, be that the chemical pollution was not really so acute. But the truth was that the scientists could not really quantify the problem. But now they actually have. Just recently, a new scientific publication filled the knowledge gap. They call it new entities, and they actually mean substances that is industrially produced or processed in the last century or decades. We talk about persistent chemicals, plastics, elements that are used in daily life products, but accumulates in the environment and ourselves at risky levels. And the urgency is presented to be at the same level as climate change. The plastics pollution have been debated frequently the last decade. But the signs of a serious pollution, not only in seas but everywhere and even in people's bloodstreams, is obviously a worrying situation that upsets us all. But this is again something that is easy to see. But we have also the hidden side of novel entities. I will now describe another part of the urgency that is more difficult to illustrate. It is about a class of substances we call endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. Actually, it's not a special class of chemicals. It's more about a serious property of some chemicals that is sometimes very hard to identify. But I want to give you the idea why the scientists are more concerned here than for any other kind of property. It is because that what you are exposed for in the very beginning of your life can seriously impact the rest of your life. This is actually nothing, not a new science, but many of the new entities have shown to play a role here. This picture shows you what I mean. Something that happened very early to the fetus can result in so-called late effects. That is not really obvious in the beginning when the fetus becomes a baby, or later a child or a teenager, but happen when we are adults. Such relationships of cause to effects is of course very hard to discover for a scientist. And this has been a controversial debate if this has been really proven or not. The situation today is, however, there is no scientific doubt that this is proven for substances already. But this is very complex to understand which substances and how big the urgency is in our daily lives. A team of scientists just recently, in February 2022, published a report where they analyzed the blood in pregnant mothers. They tested the same mixture on animals and analyzed the development of the babies. They discovered a situation that many of us don't want to accept, that we already are exposed to mixtures that results in cognitive deficits, for example, language delay. Humanity has actually already reached the critical level with serious impacts due to the widespread use of persistent man-made chemicals. Another important result was that it was the mix of small doses of common man-made chemicals like PFAS, phthalates, and bisphenols that resulted in the adverse effects. If you study each of the mentioned substances individually and add the sums of effects, you will never discover what happened in real life when we are exposed to mixtures. What does this say about the established risk assessment methods that give input to the regulators? We have actually lived with false premises of safety for a long time. So, is the EDC issue a question of just PFAS, phthalates and bisphenols? Is the problem over if we stop the production of these substances? No, unfortunately not. And here is another very big challenge in chemical management. There is an overwhelming bunch of missing data of chemicals that are present within our bloodstream, and the regulators does not guide us yet on what to do and where to start. And there are no signs that we have seen the peak chemical pollution yet. Planned global production capacity for all kinds of controversial chemicals are still accelerating. And so goes on with emissions of greenhouse gases. And my core message here is that we need a cost-effective strategy to solve all this urgency simultaneously by smart thinking and find the right incentives for business and decision makers. And circular chemistry is such a smart strategy. Now it's time to put all this together. There is a big urgency, or we can say big urgencies, but don't look at them as parallel urgencies. Why? Yeah, from system points of view, there are a few causes, but very many consequences of unsustainability. And you can never manage different actions for all kind of urgencies or consequences of urgencies. I will guide you towards the right approach in this course. And here are the important sources I promised you. For you to check or save for later use, do not forget to always make important sources available, especially when you present controversial data. Thanks for listening on this first lecture. Next important lesson is to understand how this happened in order to create a better strategy. And it is not enough with circular economy or regulations. There are much better ideas.